Hello, so today I've come down to my local wildlife reserve to compare these two lenses. So this is a Canon 400mm F5.6 lens. When you put it up against the Panasonic Lumix 200mm 2.8 lens, but using a 1.4 teleconverter. Now this is a micro four thirds lens, so we're going to put it with the GX80 camera, and we're going to convert this lens to a micro four thirds system using an adapter. So let's see exactly how they compare head to head out in the field. To start with, I think it's important to explain the reason why I've put these two lenses together, because on face value they are very, very different. One's 400mm, one's 200mm, one's f2.8, one's f5.6, so very, very different. Now a few months ago I did another comparison against another Canon lens, a 300mm f4, against the Olympus 300mm f4 Pro lens, and again another full frame lens against a micro four thirds lens. Now the reason why I keep doing this is when I swapped over from Canon to micro four thirds a few years ago, on the whole I was very pleased. However, the cost of the micro four thirds lenses was something I was quite disappointed with, especially that they are designed to cover a smaller sensor. I thought if anything they'd be cheaper lenses, but they seem to be double the price of the Canon ones. The Canon lenses seem to be so good quality anyway, I just couldn't really see or justify why I'm spending so much money on these micro four thirds lenses. So I thought about adapting the micro four thirds camera to use the Canon ones. Now going back to the 300mm test I did a few months ago, the Olympus one hands down. Now the reason why it did was because when you adapt the Canon lens to the micro four thirds system, it does lose a little bit of quality. And I started off that time with two lenses which were identical on paper, both 300mm, both f4. So this time we've done something a little bit different. Now one thing I did learn throughout test is I did use a couple of different adapters, but one in particular was one with a focal reducer, and it actually sharpened up the images. So this is what I've done today. So this is the Viltrox EF-M Mark II adapter for the Canon EF lenses to go to micro four thirds cameras. Now it's going to give me autofocus obviously, but it's also going to change the focal range of this lens. This is actually going to turn the lens into a 284mm lens. Okay, but it's going to gain me a stop of light. Now what I've done with the Panasonic is actually done the opposite. I've put the 1.4 extender on it. So that gives me a 280mm, but I lose a stop of light, so I get an f4 lens. So I've got one which is 284, one which is 280. Remember, when you put a micro four thirds camera on, so that you can double them. So it would be 560 or 568mm, both f4. So now I've got two lenses almost identical after the conversion and using the focal reducer, which as I said should sharpen the image. Now before I come out today, I have did some comparison shots already in the studio with controlled lighting, just to test things like sharpness, the image stabilization, just to see the actual general differences before I got out today to do the actual in the field test. So let's have a look at them now. Okay, so let's have a very quick look at the tests I did before I went out in the field on comparing both these lenses. And the very first test I wanted to do is just to make sure that this focal reducer was going to do the job that I wanted it to do. So I compared it against the normal one. So here I've got the Viltrox EF-M1 adapter, and this is the EF-M2 with the focal reducer down. And you can clearly see the one on the left here, now I've zoomed in, despite me digitally zooming it into 100%, is still got the sharpness. In fact, you could argue it's sharper than the equivalent of 800mm without the focal reducer. Okay, so that test shows that this focal reducer is more than capable of producing sharp images with this lens. I can use it with confidence knowing that. So the rest of the tests were in exactly this combination with the focal reducer on the Canon and with the 1.4 extender on the Panasonic Lumix lens. So sticking with sharpness, let's now compare both of these lenses. So here you go, so the one on the left here is with the Lumix, so you can tell that because it says 280mm here, and this one is 284mm on the Canon, and they're both shot at f4 and at 200th of a second. It's very, very close for sharpness, but you could say maybe around here you can see a difference, slight difference here, but that Canon almost looks like it's a little bit sharper. And let's just have a quick look at F5.6. Again, the one on the left is the Panasonic Lumix, and the one on the right is the Canon. And again, I'd say that the Canon just about edges it. Okay, so that's interesting to know. So the sharpness is still there on this lens. In fact, it's outperforming in sharpness this much more expensive Panasonic lens. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how it performs out there in the field. So the next thing I wanted to check is autofocus. So to start with, I did a simple test, just moving the actual focus points around, and they both seem obviously to work fine. The Panasonic is obviously something I don't really need to test on that, but I did notice that that's a much smoother transition in focusing, whereas the Canon does seem to be a bit more jerky and a bit more hunty, but they both seem to work fine. Okay, so the very next test was focusing speed. So both these lenses are put on a tripod 3.5 meters away from the subject. Then I've put the focus onto infinity and then simply got the autofocus tracked back to the subject, which is 3.5 meters away. Timed it and did this several times to get an average. And the results are that the Canon was 0.91 seconds on average, and then the Panasonic is only 0.18 seconds. So big difference there. So this one's under 1/20th of a second, this one's almost a second. So that's probably the biggest difference so far between these two lenses is autofocus speed. But the next test I did was for image stabilization. Now we don't need to test image stabilization on this lens. We know it works really well. We know it's about 6 stops. However, what I wasn't aware of is, am I going to benefit at all from the built image stabilization from the GX80? Bear in mind this lens is A, very, very long focal length, and B, has got no image stabilization at all. So if you look at the chart now, you can see that on the left hand side you have the column which has got no image stabilization turned on, and then on the right hand side is a with image stabilization and with different shutter speeds. So you can see, for example, on the 50th of a second with no image stabilization, you're not getting any acceptable sharpness or results at all, whereas you get 10% with the image stabilization turned on, and this increases as you go up in shutter speeds. So if you look down the table, you'll see that on average I would say it's about 1 stop of extra light in total that I'll be gaining from that image stabilization. One thing I would say is I found it so much easier to find the subject with that image stabilization turned on. I think that'll probably be the biggest benefit. It's just having a less shaky subject. Bear in mind I'm at 568mm with that lens. Then I think that just that image stabilization, just helping out a little bit, just to give you less shake, is a big, big benefit. So far I'm very pleased with the Canon. Seems to be performing really well, very sharp images. The only downside I would say is the autofocus. It does seem to be a little bit hit and miss. It works absolutely fine on close-up subjects or subjects which are quite easy to focus on. Anything more challenging or far away subjects, I seem to be sort of a little bit doubtful, but it's getting focus perfect every time. Maybe 50% of the time it is. And because of that, I'm tending to be using manual focus. A good thing about this lens is the manual focus is mechanical and full-time manual focus, which does make it easy to adjust or do those fine adjustments. And the camera automatically zooms in to give you that bigger image as and when you do use a manual focus. So it's no massive big deal, but obviously going to be probably different to the Panasonic. So now I'm using the Panasonic lens. There's a couple of big differences. So the first one is image stabilization. So the Canon's only relying on the image stabilization from the camera, which is probably going to give it about 1 stop as my test showed, whereas this combination is going to be up to 6 stops. So this is a massive difference, and it's almost like someone's giving you a tripod when you engage the dual image stabilization on the system. And the second one is going to be the autofocus. The autofocus is smooth and quick, it's lightning quick on this system. So also accurate, whereas the other one seems to be not as accurate. So you don't need to worry about manual focus on this system. It's going to do the job for you. So in a nutshell, this is a pleasant system to use, whereas the Canon one seems to have to work a little bit harder to get a good image from it. So the autofocus works really well and really quickly when it's something quite simple. So these 3 tulips here can easily be captured. The sun's on them, and 1, 2, 3, one after another, the focus has changed. So just out there near those boats is a coot's nest with some young chicks in it. It's a great opportunity for me to try out both lenses to see which one's going to perform best. So while I've got both these lenses out together, let's compare them a little bit closer, side by side. First off, price wise, so at the moment from Wax Photo, the Panasonic is £2,299 compared to the Canon Lens. Yes, you can still buy this brand new at £1,199. If you're lucky enough to find a Panasonic one on the used market, then it's around about £1,000, whereas the Canon one's much more of these available and they're around £500. So either way you look at it, it's about half the price of the Panasonic. Length-wise, well, the length is a little bit weird because the Panasonic one has got this lens hood, which is a real cheap, nasty, horrible lens hood, which dramatically changes the length, but you obviously need to use it. And with the lens hood on, the Canon is actually the same size with the extenders and the adapters on, the same length, until you use the lovely inbuilt lens hood the Canon's got. So it's a plus for the Canon having a nice inbuilt lens hood, which then makes it 7 centimeters longer. So not much, but about 7 centimeters longer for the Canon. Now weight wise, strangely enough, even though this is a 400mm lens, I think it's mainly because it's such a simple lens, whereas this one's got a lot of technology in it. This is 1.3 kilos with the adapter, and with the extender on there, this is 1.4 kilos. So the Panasonic, bear in mind it's for a micro four thirds camera, it's actually weighs more than the Canon. A few other little differences. This one has got a lovely manual aperture control, whereas this doesn't. This one's obviously got the image stabilization, which is probably the biggest difference, and it's also got a memory and function button, whereas this one's got mechanical manual focus on the Canon, which is really nice, whereas this one's all fly-by-wire, which is all very, very good. I would probably actually prefer the mechanical manual focus. So there's the differences. I'm going to carry on using them both and see how I get on. So I have found that F5.6 seems to sharpen up this lens a lot more than F4. They're both very sharp, but F5.6 really does give it a bit of punch. The colours this lens produces does seem to be superior, and also the bokeh seems really nice as well. So I'm really pleased with the actual image quality. It's just the autofocus still is struggling, and what I've tried to do is get the autofocus to be back button focus, and I'm on single focus point. I've tried all the others continuous, but they seem to be just too slow to work. Okay, so I'm just going to do a bit of a bokeh test for both the lenses. So bokeh is really important for this type of lens. That's how much the background will blur. So I'm going to do it both at f4 and f5.6. There's a fern here. Now, interesting as well, the minimum focal distance of the Canon is 3.5 meters, which is quite large. Whereas obviously that's going to affect how much background blur you can get, because you're not going to be able to get as close to the actual subject. Whereas this one, about 1.5 meters, so you can get a much closer. But I'm going to keep them both from the same distance. I'm going to shoot the fern here, and just to see exactly the difference between the two lenses. So a few minutes ago there was a sparrowhawk just resting on a post. It was quite far away. Now I just happened to have the Panasonic with me at the time, and even with the Panasonic it missed focus 2 or 3 times before I managed to then use manual focus to get the shot, or get as best as I possibly could do with the shot before it then flew away. So it just goes to show even a more expensive lens like this isn't foolproof with autofocus. So I've been complaining about the autofocus on this one, but the Panasonic can also let you down. So it's clouded over now, but I've had a couple of hours of shooting and comparing these lenses. I've mainly concentrated on the Canon one for obvious reasons, but I think it's going to be very close. Now, until I get back onto the computer, I'm not going to be able to see exactly the difference in image quality, but on face value, I think the Canon one is going to be quite close and a close contender to this Panasonic. Okay, so I'm now back. I've had a chance to look at the images, and also I've had a couple of days to think about these two lenses and the differences between them, because it's been quite hard to summarise really. But I think the easiest way to explain it is to show you the sort of experience I had when shooting this lens. So the first thing I tried to take a picture of was a little blue tip. Now this is quite hard for any autofocus to work on it, I suppose, but I took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 shots, and each one of these shots is out of focus. Now I know that my crosshair was bang on where it needed to be, but each time it started to get these leaves in focus. It was hard to tell at the time until after the bird had flown away. So then I thought I'd test it out. Literally 2 minutes around the corner was this moorhen on my nest, and it's hit about no problems at all, bang on where it needs to be. Also tested it out on this cobweb, and again it's hit about no problems. So the autofocus seemed to work on nice simple objects, but again it let me down on this heron here. Another example when I was trying my hardest to get the autofocus to work. So in total I think I took about 13 images of this heron, and then yeah, as the video showed, the tulips, nice and easy subject to take a photograph of, and yeah, the autofocus works absolutely fine and gets the focus bang on. So at that point I thought, well, it's hands down going to be the winner's going to be the Panasonic, because of the autofocus problems I'm experiencing with this Canon. But there is a but, and that is when I started taking photographs of that nest with the chicks in. Now these 3 images here show you the best ones out of all the images I took, and I had time to not only swap over the lenses but also swap over the adapter to also shoot it at 800mm as well. So the image on the right hand side is at 800mm, and then you've got the Canon at 568mm, and then you've got the Panasonic at 560. And if you compare these images, then you'd say, well, why would you not have that Canon if it's able to give you images like this at 800mm as well as that. And what this story doesn't tell you is how many images it's taken me to get those 3 shots. So with the Canon at 800mm, I took 47 shots in total of that nest, and 19 of those shots missed focus. So that's 40% failure rate of this lens missing focus. Now most of that is because I'm at 800mm, hand holding it with very little image stabilization going on. It was really hard to get manual focus to work. Knowing the autofocus is not going to do the job for me, I was trying to get my manual focus, but it's so hard to hold it steady and get my manual focus when you're in that much zoom and then a digital zoom image coming up to try to get that manual focus in. Really hard. So yeah, not the best, but when you put the focal reducer down, so you're now dealing at 568mm, I was able to get a much higher success rate. So I took 61 shots and 5 missed focus. And that's because I was double checking them every single time. I was checking, getting that manual focus set, then I was taking the images. So that's an 8% failure rate. So much better. And the shock is with the Panasonic. Now at that point I was still trusting the autofocus on this to do the job. And I took 41 shots with this setup. And out of 41 shots, 13 missed focus, which is 31%. So that's really interesting. I swung it back into the Canon's favour. But how much, I suppose, is the ultimate question. So now knowing that manual focus is going to be important to use on either of these lenses, I would have had a much more success rate of keepers if I'd used manual focus on this lens as well as the autofocus. So I suppose in a nutshell, if someone said to me, you're going out on a day wildlife shooting, take one of these, you can only take one, I'd pick this one every single time. Image stabilization is so much better, autofocus is much better, much quicker, more reliable, you'd pick this one. But if I had to buy one, would I spend twice as much money on this lens? No way. As long as I'm willing to use my manual focus a little bit, which I now know is going to be important and probably the best thing to do if you have time to tweak with manual focus anyway, with these type of lenses, with these shallow depth of fields we're dealing with, then I'd buy this. So this is the one I'd choose, it's the Canon. So look, I hope that's been useful, I hope it's been helpful, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Please do subscribe, and up to this point all the images I've shown you are raw images, so I'm going to leave off with just a few of the images from that day which have been processed for you. So please enjoy.